What's going on, everyone? Today we're gonna be making this 3D looking texture, which pretty cool. You can see that we have the highlights, we have the shadows, we have some bumps, um, and it's mostly procedural. And the funny thing about this is that we're not gonna be using any 3D tools. I'm gonna be doing this all in Photopea. You can do this in Photoshop as well. So let's get started. Let's make a new document. And to start off, I'd like to talk about some of the techniques that we're going to be using. So the most important one is the emboss filter. So filter, stylize, emboss. And what this does is it takes the brighter pixels of the image and the darker pixels of the image. Basically, the input image should be a depth map, and it'll make a pseudo 3D looking output. So the brighter pixels will look higher and the darker pixels will look lower. So if we take this noise texture and emboss it, you'll see that it makes this kind of rocky texture with the highlights and shadows and everything. It's pretty nice. Alright, now let's make our own texture. To start off, I'm actually going to use fractal noise. If you're using Photoshop, you don't have this fractal noise plugin, so you can use the clouds filter to achieve the same effect that we're gonna be going for today. But anyhow, to the fractal noise layer, I am going to apply a crystallize. Now that's not the only thing you can do with it though. If you apply, for example, a mosaic, you can make squares. So just depending on the type of texture you're going for, just play around with the different filters. But I am just going to use mosaic. I really like, or sorry, not mosaic, crystallize, because I really like the random looking polygons. And I'll just convert this to smart object, hopefully. Alright, if I applied an emboss to this, the brighter areas would show up higher and the darker areas would show up lower, but you see there's a very hard edge between them, so it would look like a drop off. Oh, we want to soften up the edges a tiny bit, so I'm just gonna apply like 4 pixels of box blur or something like that. And I'll just desaturate this with a hue and saturation. And maybe to add some extra detail, I'll also add some noise. So with a 50% gray color fill layer, you can convert this to a smart object and some noise. Just a very subtle detail. I might actually even add some blur to the noise. And maybe I'll add some text. So this commando font is pretty cool. I'll just type maybe extrude I think that's how you spell. Then move it to the center. Now you see we have some dark polygons here, and it makes the text a little bit hard to read. It's gonna get even harder if we make this 3D. So I'm gonna decrease the contrast here just with the levels and brightening the polygons up a little bit. Sorry. And already the text is a lot easier to read. And we should soften up the edges of this too. So let's convert it to a smart object and add a touch of box blur. Alright, this is going to be the depth map we're using. So let's group all the layers and then convert it to a smart object. Alright, so we're halfway there. Let's take a quick break and do a Wikipedia speed run. So we're starting with the Super Mario Bros. Movie with Chris Pratt, and we're gonna be trying to get to 3D computer graphics. Oh, this should be a pretty difficult run. Let me get out my timer real quick. And let's get started. Alright, so first let's go to maybe Chris Pratt, and then uh, I don't know, Moneyball. And yeah, we're trying to get to 3D computer graphics, so probably Aaron Sorkin. And oh, this is difficult. Let's go to the social network. And at this point, there's actually a skip we can do to save a lot of time in the run. So not a lot of people know about this skip in Wikipedia speedruns, but what you can actually do is just use the search bar and find 3D computer graphics. Alright, 54.08. I think that's a pretty good time. It's very nice. Alright, let's get back to what we were doing. Alright, now that we have our depth map, we can apply the emboss to make it look 3D. What I like to do is set the height to 1 and just change the amount. Just like that. And we can change the direction of the lighting with the angle, radio, the little knob. And let's make this darker with a levels adjustment layer. Clip it and then bring down the midtones. Just make it darker overall. Now what I like to do is make the brightest highlights glow. So to do that, first I'll make a duplicate of our embossed layer, and then I'll apply another levels adjustment layer to that. Take down the shadows by a lot. That way we isolate just the brightest lines. Just some like this. And then we can set this layer to screen. Now to add some color to our highlights, I'll just make a new gradient map adjustment layer, clip it, and then set the color to maybe I think an orange color would look good. Now the emboss filter, since it's technically 2D, it's not perfect. We have some lines at the edges of the image. We can just draw some rectangles to get rid of that. So sample a color and draw a rectangle up here. And then draw one at the left also. I'll just take the move tool, use the arrow keys to cover up less stuff. To add the glow, we're of course gonna use Super Bloom, as that's the best way to add glows. If you're using Photopea, you can install the Super Bloom plugin. It's at top on trending. Let's go. But if you're not using Photopea, if you're on like Photoshop, you can just export this image and import it into the Super Bloom web app or the desktop app. So I'll open up the plugin and maybe lower the threshold, maybe bump up our depth. It's a little high. Just something like that. Alright, I think we can apply a final color grade using color theater. So maybe apply the warm dream preset and add a bit of a vignette to darken up the edges. By the way, color theater also, you can use the Photopea plugin or the web app. Same story. And that's our result. We have this pretty nice looking 3D texture, and you can see the noise does add a little bit of detail, and we have a pretty nice glow. So I hope you find those techniques useful. Uh, Try messing around with emboss and super bloom and everything else. Come up with your own effects. I'd love to see them. Alright, that's about it for today. Have a good one.